Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California, this is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome back to the show Dan Moore, who has been a pupil upon the Way of Return since 1971, particularly resonating with the Hermetic Kabbalah in general and its Rosicrucian approach in particular, and he is also a member of the Fraternity of Hidden Light. I'm sure some of you will recognize him from our previous shows, and today he's coming on to talk about a topic that is truly fascinating to me, so I'm really excited about it, and it is the Holy Guardian Angel. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thanks again for tuning in. I'm sorry we can't live stream, but we're still having some issues with our internet being unstable, and I'll be yelling at Frontier again for the third week to try and get them to straighten that out before the end of the year. So fingers crossed, we may get a live episode again next week with Lama Kathy Wesley. So those of you who love Buddhism, and Lama Kathy is just an awesome guest, so tune in for that. And hopefully live. If not, we'll premiere it at our usual time on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock Pacific. You can get all the information, and that will be our last show of the year. Then we're into hiatus in December, so Chris and I are going to take a break and catch our breath, and then we'll be back in January with all kinds of new stuff. And we have our psychics coming up to talk about the new year. We're going to put together a panel and all kinds of cool things. And so you get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH. And while you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. We've kind of set a new goal of $400. We're looking to raise some money to improve some of our cameras and upgrade some of our equipment a little bit. So if you can afford to chip in a couple dollars, we totally appreciate it. And if not, we still love all you guys, and you're more than welcome to join us. We are not about the money. We love doing this. It's a passion for us. And the best thing you can do to help us, click subscribe and like, and that goes a long ways also if you're listening to this. And if you're out and about, you can catch us as a podcast. Just, search Sixth Sense Society on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll pop right up there too. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time. So with that, I'm going to send it back to Krista. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad things are working out, even though there's a few bumps in the road. You'll overcome that. You guys are doing great things.
Well, thank you. How have you been since you were last on the show?
A few ups and downs. I'm working on a couple of practical projects of my own. And let us just say that to ascend the mountain of spiritual attainment is a very long, arduous thing. And you're going to go through stuff that maybe is not so nice, but the journey is going to be worth it because of eventually coming to the culmination, to the apex of that. So October was kind of tough, but then we had Jupiter in retrograde, we had Mercury in my sign retrograde, when we also had the Sun and Mars on top of each other. And it was not a fun 67th birthday, but that's only one, and there are others to come.
That's a good way to look at it. I felt that way when I turned 60 when the pandemic began. So anyway, good thoughts. I like that. So let's get going on our topic. It is a really interesting and fascinating concept, which I think obviously people that are studying in the mystery schools, the Western mystery schools, know about this concept, but a lot of people probably don't know. So let's talk a little bit about what the Holy Guardian Angel actually is.
That's a good one, because I will have to say, in deference to my brothers and sisters who are members of my school and who are of this tradition in general, the concept of what an angel is, or a spiritual being, and that's what I like to call them, beings rather than spirits per se, because for me they are fully sentient beings, is quite different than what most people would say. It's kind of like when they do a magical ritual, they want to see it almost like you pick up the phone and you talk to somebody, or you get them on as we're doing here on Zoom or something like that. And it's not quite that. because truly everything is integrated at a very subtle level of being, such that everything is one. So that what is outside of you exists simultaneously within you. And I mean everything, including these angels and so forth. So to understand what they are and to interact with them is a very interesting thing. What I have read in English in this country that's been published, about half of it's kind of right on, and half of it's what I like to call gobbledygook, because so well, you're going to get some being that existed before, that'll be your holy guardian angel, and they'll have all this kind of stuff that goes on. One of the things that Paul Foster Case said is that more than a being, it is a principle that functions from an aspect deeper than our consciousness is, whatever level we're working at, and it orchestrates your life in order to have you have experiences that allow you to spiritually grow, to ascend that spiritual mountain I was talking about. And that's a very interesting idea. The thing is that like on this course that I have been working on, one of several that's going to come about, on the 32 Paths of Wisdom and their integration with the Rosicrucian grades, like the Golden Dawn grades. One of the things that's not emphasized so much that I've seen are that, each of these Sephirot have a spiritual experience. So when you get initiated into the first order work and you become a Zelator, the spiritual experience of it is the vision of the holy guardian angel. And then when you get into the first degree of the inner order, the Rosicrucian order, that lesser adept, it is the conversation, it is the knowledge of, and the conversation with the holy guardian angel. So there's this process that takes place. And in a sense, it's the same kind of process in which people have been reading. The most classical thing that's made the most impression since it was translated into English was The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, done by MacGregor Mathers. And it's essentially the same process. Even though we're not indoctrinating you for 6 or 18 months, because it's a very intense process, the way it's described in that work. But it is the same kind of thing. And with ignoring that, or not concentrating on it, or not being emphasized, you're going to miss out on a great deal of developing your potential and having a really genuine, deep understanding of what the mysteries are all about.
So it seems like quite a feat to actually have a vision of the holy guardian angel, and yet it's at the beginning of a path. So what does that actually mean to have a vision? Is it just something that doesn't mean you necessarily have to see the guardian angel? It just means that the holy guardian angel sends a vision, and then how would you know it is the holy guardian angel?
I take the word vision as being kind of metaphoric. That doesn't mean you wouldn't clairvoyantly see or experience something, but you will have, if we were to replace a pseudonym, an understanding of what the holy guardian angel is. And once you have that understanding, then it leads on to the rest of it. I remember when that happened for me, because then I realized, this is not some kind of being I'm trying to invoke and get into the triangle of art while I'm in the magical circle, blah, blah, blah. It's a process. It's a process that I interact with and that allows me to evolve. And that's why it's holy. And if you resonate with what it's all about and the fact that you're trying to work in harmony with the essence of being, with nature, the light, however you want to describe it, then there's this aspect of guardianship or guardian. So if we look at the idea of what angels, I like to look at the original meaning of words. And angel has stuck. It literally, if you look it up, it means messenger, and it comes from the Greek angelos, which was a translation of what they saw in Hebrew as messenger. So it is actually via that a form of communication. And that's an interesting idea, because now we have ideas of Mercury coming in here and the aspect that you can resonate here and be part of whatever that is, simply because, and the way I like to think of it is you're resonating with its signature, with its waveform pattern. Everything has one. You and I have it. And because it is living light, but expressing itself in a certain way, the same way music is certain, how should I say it, conglomerations of waveform patterns that are harmonious, we can then become one with it. We can understand it and know it to such a level without thinking about it.
So, do you think this is a similar concept to what Edgar Cayce talks about as the higher self?
Yes, it's very similar. In fact, the thing is to get you to this point of recognizing and then fully expressing what the other technical term they use in this tradition is called the individuality. And what that means, what's individual about it is your own unique individual expression of the one true self. There's only one of them, but it's like a diamond with many facets. And the light that comes through the diamond is one light, but each facet kind of refracts it in its own way. It colors it in its own way and whatnot. And that's an individual and unique thing. And we all have that individuality. So the holy guardian angel, or the process of the holy guardian angel, is for you to express that in an ever more perfect, clear realization of it.
So, if let's say I'm not part of a mystery school, but I want to connect to this holy guardian angel, is that something people can do on their own, or is it just easier to have at least initially a contact in a school or a mentor?
Well, a mentor who's gone through the process is great. Schools, they're kind of either, if they're good people and they're put together and they know what they're doing, great. If they're kind of fumbling around trying to figure out what it's all about in the first place, it can waste your time. But yes, you can do it yourself. And that's what the Sacred Magic of Abraham Mellon, the mage, was. It was kind of one of the first books of magic. You did it all by yourself, and it was very intense, but it worked. Now, the thing that kind of brought this all home to me is being able to talk with a member of my own school, Fraternity of the Hidden Light, who actually performed this magic successfully. And we compared notes and talked about things. It was fascinating because of certain things that we knew to help him understand and that he said for us. In fact, one of the interesting things he said, he says, I don't know why they have all this secrecy. That's ridiculous. You should learn and have this stuff out there. What might want to be secret is who has certain levels of development that other people, uninitiated people, might consider to be godlike or devil-like or miraculous, and what they're doing. They need to have that anonymity in order to be, a healer, a person who's trying to evolve the world and make it a better place. But the teachings itself, no. How are we going to get more people if we kind of, you have to pay all this money and you have to come to our school because no one else has the teachings? Horse hockey.
That's a very interesting concept. It's very much in line with the yogis and at least my Buddhist teacher, when they, even though you even have some prayers where you ask to receive the siddhis, that you don't show them, that you don't let people know how much you can do, because it will, first of all, it could inflate your own ego, and secondly, it makes people focus on the wrong things.
Right.
That these are sort of, the magical powers are somewhat byproducts, or they're meant to help people. So you're just meant to use them to help. So
it's easier to do your work from a point of anonymity rather than, this is the person I got to ask you, please do this and please do that and blah, 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 blah. You're not going to get your work done.
Yeah, that is true. I think that's very true.
And
now,
that's the only real need for secrecy in this day and age.
Now, I did come across a long time ago, one of my coworkers at the Buddy Tree gave me a ritual called the messenger ritual. And I do think he at least said it was to get in touch with your holy guardian angel. Now, I've never used it, but I did look at it. I kept it thinking someday I might. And one of the things in it had to do with finding out a name of the particular holy guardian angel that you were meant to ask the angel's name. Is that something that you agree with, or is just
Oh yeah, sure it is. The name is like trying to get a handle on its signature, on its waveform pattern, because names are significant from that standpoint, that they represent, like tuning into a certain channel on the TV or on the radio. They represent a certain waveform quality that has to do with a certain kind of force, a certain kind of knowledge and consciousness all at once. So yeah, names are important. In fact, I remember reading about a Kabbalistic ritual of healing for someone that medical science couldn't help them anymore and they were dying. So they performed a ritual to change this person's name, and they survived and they got
Wow.
better. But they weren't completely the same. They had some aspects of what they used to be, and then they have aspects of what were represented by their name. So, names are important. That's why there's this whole story in ancient Egypt about Isis having poisoned Amun and saying, I'll kill you, but give me your secret name, because she could then have power over him.
Yeah, that was the other thing that the ritual suggested you not tell anyone the name, or people can have power over you. And certainly, in spiritual traditions, renaming people, giving people secret names, that does seem to be in a lot of religious traditions.
Yeah, and in the Golden Dawn, it was your magical motto. And most of them are in Latin because they try to follow the Rosicrucian thing, but actually it could be in any ancient language that you resonated with. We talked with a Sora in our tradition that she was brought up as Muslim. And I said, you can have an Arabic name. You just take your Latin that you picked because they have a way of picking it that you don't know what it is. So your subconscious is picking what you're to be designated as, or your approach. That's what a motto means. It means your particular approach to the work. And she says, okay. And I says, I got that. In fact, there was a whole very classical Arabic hymn about that kind of thing that her name alluded to. And so you see, you have to be kind of stuff like that. There are people who say, oh, the tradition is done this way, and you have to have this grade, and you have to do, that's crap. I'm sorry. It just is. It's a rigidity of the negative side of Saturn that wants to come up with this kind of dogmatic orthodoxy, and that'll do nothing but hold you back. Agree with me all you want, but it's been my experience being a chief of a lodge and member of a grand lodge and seeing how people work within a lodge and how their talents have been squandered and wasted, and they've actually left schools because of it.
Yeah, that is too bad.
Their talent is not recognized.
Yeah. Now, you said earlier in the beginning how the Holy Guardian Angel can sort of guide you and help you. And what is the benefit? If, let's say, we have this everyone has a Holy Guardian Angel, but some of us just haven't conversed or met it. What is the difference with someone unconscious who has this connection and one that is conscious? What are the benefits of becoming more aware of your Holy Guardian Angel?
I think it has to go along with what we generally think of as those who are uninitiated and are unfortunately stumbling around in darkness, causing themselves and others suffering. Once the light goes on and you understand what is meant to be a human, literally the word means to be more than man or mankind, to realize that your inherent divinity, your latent potentials, and so forth, then all of a sudden life starts to flow in a lot better way. I remember when my wife and myself achieved a certain level of realization and consciousness, I said, you know what? We're not going to worry about it anymore. We'll be taken care of. I don't know how it's going to come or when it's going to come or any of this, but we're not going to have to worry. And that has been true even when we're down to our last dollar and things have come along, kind of like some of the stories you guys told. You don't have to worry. Things will work out. You will be taken care of. And I think that's a very great advantage, personally.
So is it also similar to, I grew up as a little girl with the belief in just having a guardian angel, that we all have this guardian angel, which, by the way, when the archangels became very popular in the sort of New Age movement and everybody was calling on Archangel Michael here and there for their parking spaces, it sort of made me cringe, and I felt so bad for our unique guardian angels. And I remember thinking, like, aren't they good enough? Like, what's wrong with just a guardian angel?
Right. Right. Here's the thing. As Case once said, he says, you'll see a mask of an angel and it'll look like Michael, or it'll look like Haniel, or it'll look like whatever. It's all the same force. It's kind of like all the different colors of the spectrum. What connects them together? They're light. But there are certain aspects of light. And that's true of all these angels. So there's nothing different or separate from them. It's just, again, going back to this concept of a certain kind of bandwidth and a quality of frequency and whatnot. It's kind of like, low tones to high tones. Woodwind doesn't sound like drums, doesn't sound like a tuba, and so forth. There is this kind of idea. And so what we want to do is we want to get the orchestra together and make music and not make noise. And that's the problem when you don't understand exactly what's going on. And life is terrible, and it's the veil of tears, and it's this and that. Yeah, if you're trying to swim upstream all the time and scrape yourself against the rocks that are hidden by the river, yeah. But if you want to turn around and flow in harmony with the current, things will work out a lot better. And there's your advantage. To answer that question, there it is.
So, and sort of going from what you just said about going with the flow, that's something I do agree with, but there is a difference with people that just, they're not necessarily going with the flow. They're just really not applying themselves, or they've kind of given up. So what is the difference between knowing that, hey, I'm going with the flow, I'm working with the harmony of the forces, and really just having sort of given up and letting life happen to you without you necessarily putting in the work and the steps to be part of this flow?
Right. I think it comes down to something that when I studied under Frater Albertus at Paracelsus College in Utah, he called it confident expectation. And we call it more simply faith. So if I'm going somewhere in my head, for a moment only, I picture, since I have issues, I've had my knee joints replaced and whatnot, I want to get a handicapped parking space, and I'd really like to have a shopping cart near that space. And I'm getting better at it, because I would say more than half the time that happens just the way it does. And when I see it happen, then I give thanks for it happening. And I don't have to sit there and work about it. I just have to say, this is going to happen, period. I don't know how. I'm not really concerned about the mechanics or the details of it. I just know it will, and leave it at that.
Yeah, that sense
there's a lot of people that try, I've got to push. I've got to have, what shall we say, the Protestant ethic. You got to work hard by the sweat of your brow. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get anywhere. Well, that's not quite the way it works. You have to be sincere, and you have to work in harmony with everything else. That's all.
It's true and it isn't true. So, because when you look at people that have mastered something, this is particularly true with like chess players, and the hours of dedication, I'm going to say, they put into things to become master of something. Now, some people do have to put more hours than others, but there's no doubt that most people, unless you have some unusual like autism, you have to put in a certain amount of hours of effort towards the things that you love to master something. And now you can be competent at it without. So I think that one of the things I have perceived in this society is there is, some people I feel that aren't putting any effort into what they want to create. Or the effort they put is sort of like an illusion of a lot of marketing, but the substance of what they market is there's nothing there. I've seen people that are great marketers, and their product or whatever it is, there's just nothing there, but they succeed because of that kind of illusion. But I feel like there's a dance when talking about this, because if you look at any of the lives of masters, including, by the way, Blavatsky had a really fascinating, adventuresome life, which blew me away when I first read it. I was like, what? She traveled everywhere. She fought in a war. I mean, So I think that's just from being in this world and seeing how some people interpret that, I don't, that it's effortless, and how, obviously you don't interpret it that way because you produce things, you put your heart into your projects and your work. And so I feel sometimes that gets used in a way that doesn't help people to realize their potential.
Yeah, I would say, to go back to the first part of your analogy with a chess master or a grandmaster or whatnot. There are people, interestingly enough, that are born kind of like a Mozart and whatnot, and they have an aptitude. They already have this ability. And how does that happen? Well, past lives, they have an openness or development of that part of their being when they're born. It doesn't really matter, but it happens. We've experienced it, we've seen it. So there's that. Then there are other people who, like you say, can sell ice to Eskimos, but they're playing on someone's emotions. They understand it so well that they do stuff like that. And in a negative sense of it, that's what we see with authoritarian regimes and people who want to be controlling, like like Scientology is, for example, or like any of the current dictatorships we see, and the attempt that was made on our democracy. And what do they want to do? They want to play in people's spheres, and they want to say, okay, I'll do this and that. They'll tell them whatever they want to hear, simply to hold the power. So there isn't the kind of thing where you have people coming up and wanting to serve the whole. They're more interested in serving themselves sometimes. And there's the negative part. And that doth make a gray or a black magician, no doubt.
Now, going back to the communion with the Holy Guardian Angel, is there something you can teach us or share with us now that anyone could do to at least begin the process of connecting with their Holy Guardian Angel they've never done it before, and let's say they're really interested in doing it?
I would recommend reading some stuff. You can read The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, but it's interesting to read some of the commentaries, particularly some of the people who did the operation and blew it. It didn't work out for them. There's a lot of material out there for that kind of thing. But basically, when you are first initiated into the mysteries, what is called the first or outer order, and the reason it's called the outer order, because one of the largest skills that you have to develop is to observe, to develop what we should call maybe spiritual insight, to see what is truly going on, not what you kind of think is going on, not what outward appearances are. And that's an important skill. It's not easily acquired, but it's possible. And it means that you have to kind of remove some of your preconceptions, and you have to observe what's going on. You have to become a little bit of a student of history and of human nature and things like this. That's not an easy thing to do, but that's what you're trained up in the first order to do. So there's the vision of the Holy Guardian Angel to start. And then once you have that vision, what do you go through these steps of theoricus, or learning the theory? What does this mean? And then the practicas are, what are those practical applications? How can I apply it practically? And then as you gain experience, you become a philosophist, which means a love of wisdom. That's a philosopher. Wisdom is the highest and the best use of your knowledge and your experience. So you go through this whole process. And I would have to say that it's kind of something of learning to observe and pay attention. The best Bible written by the hand of God is nature itself. Scientists are fascinated by it, but there's so much more to it. It's philosophy, it's religion or a spiritual tradition. It's all these things at once. And you need to take a look at it and see what's going on. It's good to get out into nature and see what's going on, and to learn about different things. I mean, one of the most fascinating things that I ever saw was on Nova, the PBS Science series. And it's this guy who kept an octopus in his living room. I mean, that was his profession. He was in Alaska, and he had an octopus in there. And you discovered the octopus did what? It was extremely intelligent. It had the ability to solve problems. It had facial recognition, and it dreamed. What is that? That sounds a lot like us. It was a sentient being. And same thing is true of all of these elementals and angels and archangels and the dynamic, subtle aspects of ecology itself, of nature, how everything interacts with us. And we're learning very hard, because we're getting spanked by the elementals right now, how to begin to live again in harmony with nature. If we don't, the spanking is going to become more severe, period.
Do you mean all the storms and
Yes, and the
hurricanes
fires and the
fires?
heat, etc. This is the first year that has happened. And for about 5 or 6 years or more, I felt this coming. I describe it as the trial of the elements. You little humans who think you know all and that you should have dominion over all, guess what? That's not the way it works. You have to be stewards of our home.
Yes.
Because we only got one.
Yes, I totally agree. Now, going back to what you said earlier about learning to observe, could you give an example of something that happened for you when you felt you were beginning to actually do that rather than before you thought you were observing? Could you give an example of what that looks like for you?
I'm not sure if I can give a specific example, but what I've discovered over the years is to learn this talent that we describe as kind of reading between the lines. So when you take a look at things that are happening, by what little bit of information you have, you can then infer a lot more understanding from it. So I'm sorry, the politics pops into my head, but there was the whole thing about what was going on with the 2020 election, and Trump pre-programming everybody saying either I win or the election was stolen because of fraud. What do you mean? You want to have your cake and eat it too? That's ridiculous, for one thing. And then because there were the old guard in the Republican Party that didn't like what he was doing, and realizing that this guy was going to try and subvert our democracy, he launched a couple of torpedoes. And we know in Georgia, we had 2 people running for the Senate seats of Republicans and 2 Democrats. And he actually said some stuff that essentially sank their campaigns. And when I saw that, I said, man, there's a civil war taking place in the Republican Party. Mm. And it's more obvious now than it was then. Mm-hmm. You can read between the lines and see what's going on. And you can do that for individuals too. When you have a competent person or chiefs who interview someone who wants to be initiated, and you're really going to put them through the initiation into the mysteries, which is an extreme ordeal. I mean, you'll be threatened with your own personal death. I kid you not. If the mystery has real power, or the school has real power that you're applying to, you're going to want to understand this person, what they're like, and so forth. Mm. And you'll even give them some tests up front to see how they'll behave. Israel Rigardi, when he was alive and practicing chiropractor in LA, and I know someone who studied under him, says, you call him up at his office or whatnot and say, hey, I really want to study magic with you. Can I do that? And he says, yeah, sure. But I'm really busy right now. Call me back in 2 weeks. Didn't matter if he was busy or not. Mm. The people who called back in 2 weeks, then he knew that they had a real stake in wanting to learn the art of magic. And I think this kind of stuff should be done today for any kind of school. Oh, you signed this, you paid some money. Here's your lessons and your ritual. Good luck. That's not the mysteries. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the Tibetan teachers and the lineage that I followed, the Kagyu, there's a lot of stories of the student being turned away numerous times. And then on top of it, they're put through these huge ordeals before they pass into being allowed to be a student. And it's sometimes it seems overboard, but it makes sense to me, particularly since these are sort of the top grade students, and the teacher recognizes the potential. So then the tests are maybe a little stronger.
Yeah, and that's the only way you're going to have a profound effect on your consciousness to rework you. It's like, do you think the sword likes to be put in the fire and beat with a hammer? No, but the end product is the point. You're going to have to take your knocks. You're going to have to go through the veil of tears and whatnot, because ultimately you will be a better being for it. And this is why we go through all of these lives, this incarnation after incarnation. And I'll guarantee you, I've been told this, but there is one last time that happens. And you will not go through the thing of birth and death anymore. you will finally transcend that cycle. But there's a lot more to go on beyond that, to be sure. Trust me.
Well, I'm so far from there, so I don't have to even worry about what that is, you know. When you were talking about, you know, the idea of observing and
Yeah.
it came to mind too that it seems like part of learning to observe is not to buy into our reactive mind. We don't, you know, we notice it, we say, oh, I'm reacting, and then you don't immediately, you know, jump into something, which it seems like, including myself during at least some of the political stuff, it's easy to kind of do that because of the quickness of social media. And it was a good lesson actually to tone myself down and to make myself slow down and not react to something.
Yeah, I've got on this series of cards that I did on the Shenmue Refresh. One of them is to sit back and wisely consider your reaction to something rather than having a knee-jerk reaction. And I'm still dealing with that too. I mean, you know, there are times I get frustrated and I talk back to the TV on the news. I mean, you know, I cannot stand the suffering that they're putting all of us through, and my kids and then my grandkids. You know, it bugs the crap out of me. So, yeah, I'm learning how to deal with that one as well.
Yeah. And then we can learn to channel that in a productive way. You know, I can say, well, it bothers me enough. I'm going to that meeting tonight, you know, and I'm going to speak up. And, you know, so I think that what I've learned is if I let it settle in, if it's still, you know, bothering me, I look at, well, what can I do? What kind of action can I really do that at least I feel is going to be productive and help the narrative go another direction?
Yeah, I've heard some people describe that as a positive aggression.
Ah.
In other words, you're angry, but you're going to use your anger in a way to do something about the situation. And I like that term, positive aggression. I've used it myself in certain things.
Yeah, I like that. It's actually, I hadn't really heard it said that way. I totally agree with that. And it makes sense because it's fuel. That aggression can be a lot of really powerful fuel.
Yeah, so there's the aspect of the ray of Mars, trying to have you use the ray of Mercury and maybe Jupiter and Venus to have positive effects. But you have to have the energy,
yes,
you know, behind it. It has to be channeled in a certain way.
Yes, it's so true. So, have you ever read any of Paulo Coelho's novels, like The Alchemist, and that was the most famous?
No, I have not read any of that gentleman's work. There's so many out there. I mean, I'm just finding out about the Wheel of Time now that it's a series on.
Oh, I know. I saw that. That. Well, he has a beautiful one called The Valkyries, in which he sets out to have a conversation with his holy guardian angel. And from what I can tell with that book, it's based somewhat on a real experience. So some of his books he talks about he's based on real experiences. In fact, a lot of them are. So I think so it's a very touching. I can't remember, but it was a very beautiful and touching, but arduous. I remember it being quite difficult.
Right.
And it involves at some point him going into the desert with his wife, and somehow these three women who are the Valkyries, and they're these motorcycle women. It's really, but it is actually, it's a very easy kind. He always has this way of writing that's very easy to get into and read and reread. But I just was kind of curious because I know that also sort of got me interested in this concept of what is the holy guardian angel, and
right. You have to look at these universal motifs. That's what I liked about Joe Campbell. I mean, here's the children of Israel wandering in the desert, and Moses before that wandering in the desert. For example, there are these common motifs you will find everywhere. And it's because, you know, we're not that different. We're all human beings, and we have our certain buttons that can be pushed, which develop this response and cause us to grow and so forth, you know.
So if let's say I start to do some kind of a ritual where I am sort of daily trying to tap into the holy and guardian angel, is in a sense, can this process be about bringing any problem to the holy guardian angel, from mundane problems to spiritual problems? Is it also sort of an advisor, like a wisdom aspect that can help a person on a day-to-day basis so they stay on a path that is kind of overall good for them?
I would say it would be a little bit better because there's a tendency to try and say, well, you deal with it rather than you dealing with it. So I would say that while that can happen, you're not going to have as much success. The other thing is that you want to look at ways of how you can learn to flow in harmony with, and in some cases, all of us in the society, the way it's running is to survive and survive with some kind of dignity with all of this. So I would say there's that, and you want to begin to listen to your insides. And that's why we have certain arts like divination. For me, divination is using it to come to an answer when you really can't come up with an answer. Mm-hmm. And if you begin to listen to your insides or to the conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, the still small voice, then eventually that kind of brings this out to you. And in fact, what I've discovered over the last couple of years is that it's saying, I'm getting these kinds of, and I get impressions, I don't hear voices in my head per se. Why don't you do this and that first? Because it'll keep this and that from happening. And I go, hey, great idea. And it's mundane stuff sometimes about what I do when I need to do some work, like around the house even, or something like this. And it actually affects every aspect of your life, not just your spiritual quest. It's a tremendous boon for that. It allows you to see what's really going on and to know when you're reading somebody's regurgitation or their gobbledygook, as opposed to someone having real firsthand experience they're drawing on and they're writing about.
So why is it something that I mean, it seems like you could also just go directly to God. And according to at least some belief systems, is what is, it seems like it's sort of an in-between way of connecting to the divine, even though it seems to be you're defining it as a reflection of the divine or part of the divine. So what is the difference between someone that might say, hey, I'm just going to get my information directly from the divine and I'm going to wait to hear that voice, however long it takes?
Here's the thing. Everything is God. Everything is divine. You're just having a way that it relates to you. And that's it. It's the same thing. I mean, you know, when Moses is up there on Mount Horeb, not Sinai, Horeb, and he's talking to this bush that burns, that's not consumed. And the bush is saying, you got to go, you know, be a redeemer. Let your people go from the slavery of Egypt. And then he says, but when they ask me, who is sending me? He goes, I am that I am, being itself, all being, you, me, everything that ever was, is, or will be. Yeah, that's how you get to it, through the holy guardian angel. We are all a part of this, you know. And the thing is, the mysteries give us a systematized, detailed way to begin to understand how it functions, how it interacts, what aspects of it, how do I relate to it and develop it and so forth. And there's a lot of different ways of doing it. There's no one right way, but there are basic concepts which are unique across time and all the traditions, East or West. And you will find these.
So it sounds like it's a path
our predecessors left for us, like a map.
it sounds like it's a very ancient concept.
There is another book I would recommend for people that's more contemporary, is called The Holy Daemon, written by a guy going by the name of Frater Acher, Acher, and that essentially is the same kind of thing as the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage, but he talks very specifically about what he did to do a rite of Saturn, which is essentially the same kind of thing, because you're dealing with the transcending to the timeless, limitless realm, which is considered death. And I mean, Saturn is the basis for Father Time and the Grim Reaper, but there is a transcendent aspect to Saturn, which is very feminine. That's why Bina is divine understanding. It's the feminine aspect of the divine. It's called the Great Sea. Well, what's not feminine about that? And then you have the highest aspect of our human soul structure, the neshama. That's a feminine word. And it's also called Master of the Temple for the Great. Now, all those things paint a wonderful picture, you know, and we need to begin to be not so lopsided in our approach and perspective of things, where eventually the divine feminine is coming into its own. There's more of a recognition of women in society in general. It's a lot of work still needing to be done. But I mean, think about it. 4 or 5 generations ago, women were not women. They were property. Mm-hmm. And this is a huge change now. There's a lot more to be done. But it bespeaks to us not listening to a certain aspect of ourselves, the divine feminine.
So Saturn is an interesting thing in the metaphysical world. Saturn, the planet. I've recently read a book by Aaron Sullivan on the transits of Saturn, which is when you delve into Saturn as an archetype, what I found is it is a bit of a heavy archetype, which, you know, normally I wouldn't say that. I didn't expect that experience because I've read a book about Saturn before. This one, however, had a very big effect on my psyche. And Saturn seems to be hugely important in mystery schools, like Theosophy. And of course, in astrology, I kind of know how it means. But it's a curious thing that the rite of Saturn to me would be connected to the holy guardian angel on some level, though I understand by the position that Saturn has in Kabbalah, you know, the world card can be associated with Saturn, which is part of the middle pillar. And of course, Binah is connected to Saturn. But it seems like it would be a very arduous rite to do, at least initially, because that no matter what you say about Saturn, Saturn is not easy, even though Saturn rewards you for your efforts, it seems like.
No, none of this is easy. There isn't, you can't take a pill like in the Matrix and, oh, look, you know, I see the world now exactly how it is and how it works. I'm sorry that, you know, that's Hollywood and Madison Avenue, and you've been watching television commercials way too much. Nothing is easy. It takes time. And in fact, it takes hundreds of lifetimes to do that. And we accumulate this experience to do that, because the aspect is, we call it the thread soul here. I think it's called the, I'm not that good with Sanskrit. But eventually in the Vedanta, what they talk about is that our incarnations are like beads on a thread. And the thread demonstrates a continuity of consciousness and experience. And all of those threads are paid out by the neshama at the master of the temple, at Saturn or Binah. And so we are the products of this accumulated experience. And that's why you can have some kids that are born like Mozart. He knows how to write music and do this and do it extremely well. How did he get that? Well, you know, I happen to think reincarnation is a large part to do with it. So it's the kind of thing about where Saturn for the ancient Greeks was called Chronos. And this is where we get our modern word chronology. Well, Saturn has to do with time. You've got Father Time there. And maybe our perception of time as being lineal, and that, you know, the past was the future will be what happens now, and the present is the only thing that's real, is not quite the case. Maybe past, present, and future, because everything is one, are also one in an eternal now, as it has been described. Now, that's a mind-bending idea. But recalling of past lives, all of a sudden you're making the past real again. Being able to precognitively know what's coming, maybe you're making the future real. So this is some of the great, that's why it's called greater mystery work. This is some of the stuff, the consciousness that is to be developed for a genuine adept. And what, you know, these Western schools, they advertise on the internet for whatever, they need to be teaching you that. What is that all about? How do you develop it? No, it's not easy, but it's possible. We have an infinite capability to realize our latent potentials and to realize our inherent divinity. And that's the mysteries we're all about.
Yeah, I like I said, that the Saturn, I've been thinking a lot more about the myth too, and it's some of the mythology associated with the planets like Saturn is actually fairly gruesome. So, where he swallowed his children, and then one of them escaped. It was Zeus, and managed to free them later on, and so I mean, I know all of that can also be metaphors.
About the metaphor.
Yeah.
If Saturn is time produces stuff, which might be called its offspring, but eventually consumes it again too. Produced ancient Egypt, but Egypt is no more. And in that sense, that's a very deep philosophical realization. That's what was meant by the ancients. In that, yeah, it's gruesome. He ate his children. Ooh, well, what do they mean by that? You had to kind of, it grabbed a hold of your consciousness for one thing, but what exactly is being told to you? What's going on here?
What's interesting in the book I was reading by Erin Sullivan is she talked about if you have a Saturn that is devouring your chart, like there's too much of it, that the antidote was gold, Jupiter, more Sun, more Jupiter, and more Venus. And what I did during the time where I did feel like the Saturn archetype had sort of got me by its grasp, I even had some physical ramifications. I listened to it and it actually worked. I looked at my chart. I looked at where I need to do more Sun things. And I said, okay, I'm going to go do what my Sun wants me to do today. And I was amazed how simple and effective that was to balance out Saturn. I'd never thought of Saturn as being sometimes too much, taking over.
All things in moderation. There has to be an equilibration and a reconciliation. And you said Saturn and lead. Isn't it interesting that alchemy changes lead into gold, which is the sun? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now you begin to say, oh, here's the rest of the story. Well, maybe it's literally true, and I think it is, but here is it as it relates to us as spiritual beings.
Yes.
And now here's something else that's even interesting. In alchemy, they describe it, they call it the opus Saturnus, meaning the work of Saturn. And they say that the work begins and ends with Saturn. Well, where do we see that? On the Tree of Life, like you had mentioned, there is the card of the world, which relates to Saturn and to the 32nd path, and incidentally, cosmic consciousness, according to Dr. Case. So that's Saturn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we look up at Tiferet, the halfway point, the first grade of adeptship, and have you ever, I don't know if you looked at the Hebrew spelling, but if you do, there's a Tav or Saturn at the beginning of that word, and a Tav at the end of it too.
Ah.
And it's the halfway point. What's even more interesting, you want to see another thing, which was something that was told to me by the inner school, and all this stuff, like you said, simple, it's in plain sight. Why don't you people see it? Like I was once told, it's as plain as the nose on your face. If you drew a vertical line from Tav at the 32nd path, straight up the middle pillar, it would cross over Tav as the middle letter, because there's 5 letters in Tiferet. Tav is the center one. And it would end at the middle letter of Keter, which happens to be Tav again.
Mm.
And it's right there in plain sight.
Huh. Amazing. I love that. Yeah, it's amazing.
This is what we need to teach. I mean, these schools need to teach how simple things are. It's not this complex stuff, and after that, maybe it's this, and maybe it's that. All this conjecture, forget about it. Once you come to that point of understanding, there has to be a few basic laws that are involved in this and how to read this stuff. It all falls together and it makes perfect sense. And it's easy. That's what I meant about you're going to be taken care of. It's not going to be a struggle anymore because you're not out there scratching your head trying to, well, let me try this, or let me try that, or let me, no, you just sit back and you do what you need to do. That was the interesting thing about this fellow who had finished the sacred magic, because it kicked up the energies of his aura so much so that he would walk into different places like someone's house, and all of a sudden the energies that were latent in there, like what you call poltergeist or stuff like this, they'd start to react to him. But then he says, it didn't bother me at all. In fact, now it's kind of annoying. He says, but I could cleanse and heal those energies, and I knew exactly what to do and how to do it. I didn't have to go read a book about cleansing a space. I knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it comes. You can know stuff without thinking about it. because all the knowledge is there. Everything is one. All the knowledge that ever was, is, or will be. This is one of the secrets of that hidden mystical Sephira called Da'at. It truly is the mystical twin of Keter, but it's the active part of it. It's the part that we can have immediate access to.
Well, what's interesting, you're right. I think for me, I think it's the first time in a long time I figured out something so easily as a remedy, and I trusted it, and I tried it, and it worked right away. When I think about it, I haven't always been that way because, I think there is sometimes, especially with things that involve a lot of knowledge. Like, I mean, you certainly have to study astrology to get some of the language and sort of the energies,
Right.
and it's like, it's like learning a language basically. But it can seem like you have to do more than you really do to actually use it in a way that's helpful. So like for me, that's the first time I can think of where I said on my own, you know what, I'm going to see, what does that mean in my chart? Well, that means that I need to look for, either Jupiter or the sun, and so to see what they're like. And so I just flowed with it. But I think one of the things that is if I was to advise people is to trust that earlier on, that there's a no end to knowledge. I
Right.
mean, it doesn't mean you have to accumulate it all.
No, and in fact, what happens is as you open yourself up and you begin resonating with these things, knowledge comes to you.
Hmm.
You get a certain book, or this is available, or you read something on the internet, or however it comes, and you go, this teaches me something that I didn't know before, or that I needed to know, or that I was looking for. And yes, it's that simple. People don't realize they have to, we've got to do this. Yeah, life is hard, life is tough, but part of it is getting us to simply wake up and recognize what things are, rather than trying to say, I don't understand it, or I have to work really hard for it, or something like that. You can, because one of the things that's interesting, this thing about the 3 rays that come from the crown of brilliance from Keter, the last one is Gimel, and Gimel is a camel. Camel's the ship of the desert, so you have this thing about a sine wave. It literally is the principle of vibration, but in the high priestess, she holds the scroll, and the scroll is memory. So everything is one, and we are one, and we are simply trying to remember, to develop the recollection of what we truly are, and to get back there. And once you start to do that, hey, it's simple. It's not hard. Edgar Casey, you mentioned him. He'd never cracked any of his school books. He put them under his pillow and he slept on them.
Yeah, that was
And he knew
amazing.
it all.
That's I wish I had that talent. I have to admit that was
You do. Everybody does. Just believe it. That's the first step. You have to believe it. If you don't, it's not going to happen.
Well, I do have the talent. If I touch a book, I know I need to read it, but it's only for me. I can't do it for you. I know I feel the vibration of the book, and it's always if I touch it and I go, yeah, and then I make myself read it, it's exactly how I feel about it. So that I do have.
That's an aspect of that ability which can expand into something even more. Maybe you can't do it for me, but one of the things I remember reading about people who were accomplished dowsers, that if you had someone who didn't know how to do that, they could touch their hands or put their hand on their body, and all of a sudden they could act and do it.
Ah, interesting.
So maybe touching someone might help. You never know.
Them. Yes.
I mean, there are no limits, and that's why it's called the limitless light, the uncreated, never-ending, limitless light of being, and there are no limitations to it. What does your creative imagination want to do with it?
Well, that's an important part. Well, we're getting close to the end of the show. I want to thank you for coming on again. As always, it was a really delightful conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And people, we have his contact on our website, so that's true of all of our guests. So make sure if you want to get a hold of any of our guests, but Dan in particular, you can go to our website and the contact will be there.
Sure.
So
I'm happy to talk to anybody.
That's wonderful. So thank you again very much. And thanks again, folks, for tuning in. And we don't forget to like us, subscribe to us. It really helps us on our YouTube channel. And have a great week. I look forward to exploring the esoteric and the obscure together with you again.